Very good evening and welcome to all the participants. This is the 69th leadership conversation we are hosting today. And we are extremely fortunate to have Ms. Uma Kasoji, who is the speaker for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Ms. Uma Kasoji to this conversation. Welcome, ma'am, and good evening.
Thank you so much.
It's our fortune, it's our good fortune that we've been able to identify you and have a conversation with you. Today, lots of members in the audience are looking forward to listening to your talk on active career management. As you know, it is directly useful, so the curiosity is higher, and I'm sure everyone stands gained at the end of this session. So thank you, ma'am, for agreeing to do this. Let me do a brief introduction and then hand it over back to you to begin your session. We call it Wise Views Leadership Conversations, which are held every Friday evenings. Today, as I mentioned, the topic is active career management, taking charge of your professional growth. This will be led by Ms. Uma Kasoji. She's the co-founder of the Star in Me. It's an organization, and she's also member of the Board of Governors of the prestigious IIM Kozhikode. The agenda, very simple. First half an hour introduction as well as talk by Ms. Uma, followed by Q&A session of 30 minutes. I take pleasure in introducing Ms. Uma. She is the co-founder, as I mentioned, and also board member of Indian Institute of Management Kozhikode. She is a management consultant turned entrepreneur. This is a very nice combination, actually. After corporate career spanning 17 years, she decided to pursue her passion for diversity by co-founding the Star in Me with a vision to bridge the gender gap in the workforce and in leadership. From incubating consulting practices to spearheading transformation programs with C-suite leaders across 5 continents and her recent foray into entrepreneurship, Ms. Uma has diverse experience serving on the board of IIM Kozhikode, that's where she studied, has added another valuable dimension to her profile. Ms. Uma is a voracious reader, speaker, and often blogs about career growth and a professional life. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful profile. We've been looking for leaders like you. Thanks for agreeing to be with us today. And I will take one more moment and introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor R. Prasad. He's the director at the academic wing of the ICFAI group. He is also the professor and course mentor for this online MBA program. His teaching areas are strategy and entrepreneurship. He brings with himself a corporate experience of 12 years, a teaching and research experience of 17 years. He has BTech from IIT Bombay and post-graduation in management from IIM Kolkata. He has published 3 articles, edited 8 books, and presented 4 conference papers, and also authored 1 book. Welcome, Professor Prasad. Good evening. So with this, I once again go back to Ms. Uma. Ms. Uma, this is an opening remarks for about 20 minutes or 25 minutes. After that, we'll have a moderated Q&A session. All the audience, at the time of registration, the participants have registered their question as well. And those questions are landscaped and curated properly so that we can have a nice conversation. So that will be picked up at the time of Q&A. So for now, over to you. And once again, thank you and welcome to this conversation.
Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thanks for making time on a Friday afternoon. I'm sure all of you are getting ready for the weekend. So let me make it as interesting as I can. Firstly, I'll probably tell you a couple of stories to get this started as to why I'm very passionate about this topic of active career management. Like it was mentioned in my introduction, I am a voracious reader. I read over 100 books a year, have been doing this for the past 20 years. And I often blog because I read so much that knowledge has to come out somewhere. So I blog quite a lot. Every week on LinkedIn, I post my reflections on a lot of topics to do with career, professional growth, success, entrepreneurship, and so on. When I first started my career, I went to IIM as a fresher. So I first started working with GE Capital just right out of campus. And I had joined at a managerial level since I came in from an IIM. I was managing a team of 30 people, all of who were much older than me at that point in time. They all had at least 5-6 years of experience, and I was there as a fresher. So it took a lot of courage to figure things out and actually act like a manager to such a senior crowd at that point in time. One of the first things that I discovered a few years into my career is that I used to have this assumption that if I sat in my cubicle, in one corner of the office, put my head down and did a lot of hard work, my brilliance and my amazing performance would get recognized by everyone at work. I would get rewarded, I would get promoted. But that was my first lesson, that unless you speak about your work, unfortunately, our work will not speak for itself. So a lot of times we have to speak about the work that we do. We have to speak about the value that we're adding, and the strengths that we are bringing to the table. So a couple of experience during my entire career shaped my view around how one needs to manage their career. And one thing that I realized is that a career is not something that you leave to chance. You cannot just say that, okay, fine, my career is moving in a certain direction. I'm getting a promotion. Somebody asked me to move to a different team or to a different department, and then I'll just sort of go with the flow. In terms of your career also, you have to take charge of it, get into the steering wheel, take the steering wheel and control your career, take it in the direction that you want it to go into. Don't leave it to chance. And this is what active career management is all about. It is about taking charge of your career and routing it in a direction that you want it to go in, to reach a destination or a milestone that you have set for yourself. So as we get started, I'd like you to pick up a pen and paper, if you can, if it is handy, or if you're on your laptop, just open a Word or an Excel sheet. And I'd like you to create 2 columns like this. Put these names on it. I'm used to doing a lot of sessions for women professionals, hence you would see a lot of women pictures here, but don't mind this. Just take a paper or an Excel or a Word document. Draw 2 columns, write Emma in the first column, Olivia in the second column, and start putting in some numbers, number 1 to 12. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, basically a series of work scenarios actually. And I want you to mention in each scenario, are you more like Emma or more like Olivia? Okay, so let's get started. So this is basically a tale of 2 professionals, Emma and Olivia. Both of them have similar educational qualifications. Let us say they both graduated from whichever, since we're talking about IIMs, let's say both of them graduated from an IIM. Both are equally proficient at work. They're both dedicated, both have a lot of ambitions, and both have a positive attitude. They want to do well in their career. They come with a lot of positivity, optimism, and they're quite confident because they've studied at prestigious institutes and so on. Now, Emma is ambitious. She has a lot of long-term career goals. She knows that, in 10 years, she wants to get into, let's say, a senior leadership level. And she works very hard, but she takes life as it comes. So, things happen to her and she allows them to happen. Whereas Olivia is also ambitious. She has long-term career goals, but she also has a lot of short-term goals. She knows that in 10 years, I want to get into a senior level, in which case, after 3 years, I need to be at, let's say, an early management level. After 6 years, I need to be at a mid-managerial level. And after 10 years, I get to a senior level. So she works very smartly. Now, let us take a look at several work scenarios. As I take you through these scenarios in your columns, I would like you to put a tick in whichever column applies to you. So if this is a situation about being in meetings, Emma is quiet in meetings. If she has a good idea, she tells her colleagues. So, you're attending a meeting and suddenly you have an amazing idea, but you don't raise your hand and tell everyone in the room. You just tell the person sitting next to you because it's easy and safe. Whereas Olivia always speaks up in meetings, shares ideas, and participates actively. So irrespective of whether she is extremely confident about her idea or not, she always raises her hands, puts the idea across, even at the risk of sounding silly. Maybe the idea is very, very silly, but still she'll share it with the rest of the group. So this is the first scenario. I hope you've put a tick in whichever column applies to you. Let's look at the next one. when Emma does a great job at work, she feels good and she shares it with her friends. So let's say you did a great job at work and your client praised you or your manager praised you. You would go and tell your colleague, the person sitting next to you, or maybe you go home and tell your spouse or your brother or sister or your friend saying, you know what, I got an amazing remark from my client today because I did a great job. What does Olivia do? When Olivia does a great job at work, she talks about it in meetings, she brings it up in conversations with leaders, and writes about it in team updates. So Olivia, if she's going for a coffee break and she meets, let's say, the head of her department, who's also picking up coffee from there, she will walk up to the head of the department and say, you know what, I presented this project to this particular client the other day and they were extremely pleased about it, and I felt so good about that. So the senior leader gets to know that there is a person called Olivia in my company and she's doing a great job and clients are very happy with her. So this is what Olivia does. Obviously it takes a lot of courage to walk up to that senior leader and mention this, but that is how she manages it. Let's look at scenario 3. Again, I hope you've put in a tick as to whichever column applies to you. If you do a good job, do you tell your friends or do you go and tell everyone else in at work? Scenario 3. Emma enrolls in mandatory training programs at work, but doesn't upskill herself proactively. She doesn't read books or keep track of advances in her field. So if your company sponsors you for your training and tells you that it is mandatory for you to get promoted or it's part of your performance appraisal, then you go for that training. Otherwise, after going home in the evening, it's time for Netflix or Amazon Prime, but there is no time to read books or listen to podcasts because who wants to work even beyond office hours, right? So that is what Emma does. What does Olivia do? Olivia is constantly looking for ways to upskill. She takes courses, she gets certifications, she subscribes to industry news, reads books, talks to people from different fields. So you notice what Olivia is doing, apart from the mandatory trainings that her company sends her to, she is also doing things on her own. Nobody's asked her to do it. Nobody's even checking. Her manager doesn't come and ask her, hey, did you read some article over the weekend? But she's doing it because she knows that it is great to upskill, and acquiring knowledge always creates a huge advantage. So which category do you belong to? Put a tick in that column. We go to the next one. Emma shies away from talking to senior people in the organization. So, as far as possible, she will go for a coffee break surrounded by a few other peers or colleagues, has lunch again with the same people, does not talk to senior people unless otherwise somebody calls her and says, the senior manager is calling you and they want to talk to you. So, there's no need to really talk to senior people in the organization. So why do that? So this is Emma's attitude. What does Olivia do? Olivia introduces herself to senior leaders and stays in touch. She seeks advice and keep them posted on her progress. So why only talk to your manager, right? Olivia takes an opportunity to go talk to her manager's manager also. If there is some other senior leader in the company who she gets an opportunity to talk to, let's say you're in the elevator with another senior leader, you can actually either look the other way or look into your phone, which is what most of us do, right? Or find another peer and talk to them. But what does Olivia do? She finds another senior leader in the elevator. She says, good morning, ma'am or sir, and starts a conversation. Like, I presented this project to a client last week and they were so impressed. That's a great opportunity to tell them about the work you're doing. So this is what Olivia does. Now, be very honest and put a tick in whichever column applies to you. Let's move on to the next scenario. Emma wants career growth and assumes that her effort and performance will get her there. So Emma is like Uma was when she first started her career. She assumed that if she sits in one corner, puts her head down and does her work diligently, people will recognize that she's an amazing performer and give her the recognition that she deserves. What does Olivia do? She analyzes what she needs to do in order to grow. She finds mentors, sponsors to support her. So she's being very strategic about her career. She knows that, when it is time for a performance appraisal and a promotion discussion, both the managers, let's say I am managing both Emma and Olivia, and I know that both are good enough and I will take their case to the promotion team. Usually there's a team of people who take a call on who gets promoted. And then I will tell them, Emma has done ABC things, Olivia has done XYZ things. But if the panel has 5 people and 4 of them know Olivia, nobody knows Emma apart from me, who do you think has a better chance of getting promoted, right? Olivia has a much better chance because more leaders know her, more leaders have seen her, and so on. So Olivia is very strategic. She knows what she needs to do in order to grow. And she also finds mentors, sponsors who can support her on her growth journey. Emma avoids things which make her uncomfortable and take her out of her comfort zone. So she's sticking to the tried and tested. She knows that she's good at, let's say, coding or whatever job that she's doing, let's say invoice processing or process improvement, etc. She sticks to that and does not try to do anything outside of her comfort zone. What does Olivia do? Olivia constantly challenges herself. She moves out of her comfort zone. She takes risks and learns. So, she may be doing her job well, but somebody says, you know what, there's a senior client visiting us from another location next week, and we need a team to put together the visit plan or whatever. Olivia will volunteer for it, whereas Emma will say, why should I volunteer for something like that? It'll put me in the spotlight along with several leaders. If I make a mistake, then so many people will know that I'm not good enough. So she shies away, whereas Olivia is actually there taking those risks and trying to prove herself. Which scenario are we on? We are on scenario 7. I hope you're putting a tick in whichever column applies to you. Emma relies on her domain skills and does not focus on soft skills and interpersonal skills. So let's say Emma is a Java developer. She only knows Java, and maybe if there are new feature releases in Java, then she will learn that, but she does not focus on anything else. Whereas Olivia, she gives equal importance to domain skills, soft skills, and interpersonal skills, and she works on all these. So she makes it a point to not just be good at her domain, but she will take up any opportunity to improve her communication skills, her confidence, how to negotiate better, how to manage stakeholders, and so on. Because nobody is born with these skills, right? You have to work on them. So she tries to gain all these skills. The next one, I think we have 12 scenarios. We are currently on 8. Emma focuses on her immediate scope of work and does not get involved in other projects. So does what is given to her, does not go beyond that boundary. What does Olivia do? She volunteers for projects outside of her work to learn and meet new people. Like I mentioned, there's a client visit or a senior leader visit. She will volunteer for that. And she will probably need to spend more time outside of her routine work. But she does that because that gives her an opportunity to meet new people from other departments, to meet leaders, and do things which are slightly different from the usual work. Emma spends time with her core group of colleagues and doesn't seek to meet new people. So in her team, Emma has some good close friends. She always goes for coffee with those same friends. She goes for lunch with the same friends. When they attend a town hall, all this group of friends sit together. Be honest again. If this is what you do put a tick in this column itself. What does Olivia do? She keeps her core relationships, but she also builds her network within and outside the organization. So when she goes for coffee, if she sees somebody from another team, she makes it a point to talk to them. While attending a town hall, she'll go and sit with people from another team just to get to know them. And not just within her organization, she also attends industry events and other networking events to meet people outside of her organization. Emma is not part of any networks outside work. She does not attend industry events or forums. So every weekend she's at home or with her friends. Whereas Olivia is part of networks outside work. She makes time to attend at least one event in a month. So, there are several events that have begun to happen again in person now that COVID is probably out of the way. So Olivia makes time to attend that. Emma is present on professional platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., but is not active. So I'm sure everyone here has a profile on LinkedIn. So does Emma, but she is not active. Olivia has a strong presence on social media. She keeps posting about her industry, her niche, and she also follows industry leaders and shares their posts or engages with their posts. Now, again, be honest, whichever one applies to you, put a tick in that column. Emma has great domain knowledge and experience, but does not create any content. So Emma might be an amazing expert at, let's say, data science or analytics, analytics, but then that experience she uses at her job. If somebody has any questions, she answers those questions. But you and I will never know that she is amazing at analytics because she has not ever created any content. She's never spoken about it publicly. Whereas Olivia publishes white papers and blogs with her views on her domain and industry. So Olivia is active on all these professional platforms. She publishes white papers, she writes blogs, keeps sharing views on what is happening in her industry, in her domain. So if you fast forward a few years, what did we see? Emma was passive about her career, right? She was sort of allowing things to happen to her. Whereas Olivia managed her career actively. She was being very strategic. She did the right things that she needed in order to grow. So if you were to fast forward a few years, where do you think these two professionals would have reached a few years down the line? Who do you think would have grown faster or succeeded faster, right? And no points for guessing that. Olivia would have grown much faster and would have reached much higher up the career ladder than Emma did. And hence, who do you want to be? Do you want to be Emma or Olivia? So if you honestly take a look at the columns and the tick marks that you have put in each column, sum up the columns and realize, do you have more points in the Emma field, in the Emma column, or in Olivia column? That will already tell you whether you are more active about your career or more passive. So this is, you don't have to share that with anyone. It's for your own reflection, but you already know whether you are managing your career actively or you're managing it passively. So let that be a starting point for us to realize. And all of you agree, right? Given the background that we have just gone through, Olivia will certainly do much, much better in her career than Emma ever will. But then it doesn't mean that Emma can never change. Emma can always become more like Olivia. That's something that she can always do. So what is active career management? Active career management is being intentional about your career. So manage your career with intent. Don't allow it to happen to you, and manage it systematically. So this is what active career management is all about. There are 7 key things that I would like to talk about when it comes to active career management. And a lot of these points we've already covered in the scenarios. The first thing is you need to create a career plan, because, imagine you're driving a car and you want to go somewhere. Will you even know which road to take, at what speed to drive, unless you know your destination? So similarly with your career, unless you have a destination in mind, unless you know that 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, this is where I want to be, you will never get there. In fact, sometimes when people ask this question, right, in most of your job interview questions, you would have been asked this particular question by the interviewer. Where do you see yourself 5 years down the line? And most of us get irritated when we hear this question. We don't know what will happen tomorrow given the pandemic and so on. And you're asking me where I will be 5 years down the line. But now you see where they're coming from, because those who have at least an idea in mind as to where they want to be are the ones who will eventually get there. Because if I have no plan, I have no aspiration, then my entire career is sort of moving along with the flow. So this is the first thing. Decide where you want to be and create milestones. So you need not create a 15-20-year career plan. Create a 5-year career plan, but know that in year 1, these are the 5 skills I want to gain. Year 2, this is where I want to be, and so on. So this is the first step. The second step, you need to build a strong professional network. I know 80% of professionals avoid doing that. We don't pay attention, but it becomes extremely important, because you never know when your next amazing opportunity will come from, unless there are people that you know. So whether it is within the company, outside the company, your network is your net worth. You would have heard this particular quote, right? So the more the number of people who know you as a professional and can vouch for you, the greater are your chances of success. So it is extremely important to build a strong professional network. The third thing is to find a mentor, a coach, a sponsor, and I hope you know the difference between all these. A mentor is someone who has walked the same path that you have. So if you're in the field of, let's say, whatever, data science analytics, find someone who is a leader in this space, or find someone who has reached a very senior level in this space, and they can mentor you as to what skills you need to learn, what kind of exposure you need to get, and so on. So find a mentor. Find a sponsor. A sponsor is someone who speaks for you when you're not in the room. So when I spoke about the promotion process, right, when there are 5 people sitting and deciding who needs to get promoted, if one of those 5 people is actually your sponsor, who is willing to speak for you, vouch for you, and say, you know what, Uma is amazing, I think she deserves the promotion, then your chances have increased exponentially. So find sponsors who are senior people in the company, keep them updated on your progress. You will be extremely surprised as to how many senior leaders are willing to give you time. 90% of the people do not have the courage to approach someone senior and tell them, I admire the work that you do, I would really like to learn from you, and is it okay if I set up let's say 30 minutes with you once a quarter to have a chat? Try asking somebody that in your office. Very rarely will someone say no and say, no, I don't have 30 minutes in a quarter. It's very little that you're asking for. So go ahead and try it out. Now, a coach is someone, like in sports, you have coaches. Nowadays, even in business, it is considered extremely important to have a coach, because those are the people that you can speak to in a very candid manner. They will help you identify your strengths, your weaknesses, what you should work on, and so on. So important to find all these people who can be your allies. The fourth thing, I speak a lot about personal branding. I'm extremely passionate about this concept of personal branding. There was a time, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when we thought people like Virat Kohli or an Aishwarya Rai or a politician would have a personal brand. But in today's times, each of us needs to have a personal brand, because without that, then you don't have an identity in the world, you don't have credibility as a person. And how do people get to know your personal brand? Like, I keep giving this example. It takes only 7 seconds for us to form our first impression about somebody. Just 7 seconds. So in fact, if we were to do this session physically, and if I was coming to speak to all of you in a physical setup in a conference room, from the time that I was introduced till the time that I walked onto the dais and took the mic, you would have already formed an impression about me before I even said the first word. So that is how fast our mind creates impressions. But in today's world, we don't even have those 7 seconds available to us, because the moment this particular event was published, I am sure that at least 70 to 80% of you would have gone and looked me up on Google, typed my name to figure out, is this lady worth spending 1 hour of my time with? Is it worth listening to her? So, considering many of you have joined, I'm happy that you found something worthy on Google about me that made you want to join today's session. So it's extremely important to build a personal brand. The next one is, it is also important to continually gain new types of exposure. So in my profile, you would have seen that I've actually done a lot of consulting work. As a result, I worked with C-suite clients across industries. So I worked across banking, insurance, consumer goods, telecom, and so on, with some of the largest companies. And I worked across 5 continents. So every new country I went to, the culture was different, the kind of values and the kind of work ethic and working practices were different. So frankly, the value I gained from having worked across different industries and continents has been amazingly useful to me. And I can say that compared to a lot of other colleagues who probably stuck to the same job, same industry for a long time, they would not have learned as much as I did. So that doesn't mean you have to keep changing jobs, but within your organization itself, I'm sure you can find other roles, other projects that will give you additional exposure. Keep learning. This one is something that all of us should completely be aware of. I keep sharing this quote. In fact, I made it up myself. So it goes after this: an apple a day keeps the doctor away. All of us know this. So I usually say a knowledge capsule a day keeps obsolescence at bay. So if you do not want to become obsolescent or irrelevant, you have to keep consuming at least one knowledge capsule a day. If you can read books, go ahead, read books, listen to a podcast, watch a YouTube video. Today, there are so many options available for all of us to keep learning. So keep learning. There is absolutely no two ways about it. The one who continues to learn is the one who will eventually grow. I'm sure all of you would have heard this, but some of the most successful people in the world, you take anyone's name, whether it is Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or whoever else, they all read extensively. So that is one thing that they all vouch for in terms of continuous learning. And finally, keep tabs on the industry and the market. So the exponential rate at which industries are changing today, right? It's extremely important to know where your industry is headed. What is the future of work in your area? Because that will determine how you should change your skill set, what you should do in order to adapt to the new environment. So these are 7 key lessons I'd like to leave with you on the concept of active career management. There's quite a lot to say. I've in fact written an extensive blog about this, which I can share with you later, but I think I'm on time now, so I'll take a pause.
Thank you, Ms. Uma. I think it's a wonderful conversation, wonderful session so far. The presentation covered largely about the scenarios between Emma and Olivia, and large number of Emmas are present in us. That's my hunch, because several times my own marking was on the side of Emma and not on the side of Olivia, to be honest. I think I'm sure it is going to be true to a large number of people as well. It is very, very useful that this is awakening, and this is in a way demonstrated that we need to move from passive to active. So it's so useful. Thank you very much, Ms. Uma, for doing this. And also these key lessons or 7 essential steps that you have listed, that is still on screen. Actually, everyone would have noted it down also. They are very useful, and each of it has several pathways for us to follow and actually actively work on it and build what is called our own career. So thank you very much for doing this. This is a wonderful, highly involved kind of a session that we have heard from you so far. Thank you very much. We will quickly move to the Q&A. We have about 2 to 3 clusters of questions that we would. Ms. Uma, can you please close the screen? Yeah, thank you. So what we have is a couple of clusters of questions, and as I mentioned earlier, these questions are collected from the participants at the time of registration, and they are properly curated. Professor Prasad will start the first cluster, and I will join after for the next cluster. Okay, Professor Prasad, I welcome you to start the first one. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving us perspectives which will help all members in the audience and whoever is going to listen to the video later to move forward with being more open and more directed, self-directed in how they function. The first question in this cluster is about how do you encourage people to take up protean careers? There's a lot of self-direction in that. There's a lot of psychological satisfaction. How do you get people to move in that direction, considering the kind of culture that we are in and the kind of inputs that people of that generation get?
Could you say that again? I didn't catch you.
How do you encourage youth to take up protean careers?
So I think one of the best parts about the current generation, right? And when you compare it with a couple of decades ago, I keep telling people that when I was looking at what I wanted to do after 12th, there were clearly just 2 options available to me: either become an engineer or become a doctor, because everything else was considered like something that average students did. So if you were a smart student, then you either became an engineer or a doctor, or sort of picked up everything else which was average. But today, I think the best part is you see a lot of smart young people picking up whatever catches their fancy. So I've seen a lot of smart people pick up game development, for instance, video game development, which is a huge field. There are people picking up communications and PR kind of fields and so on. So what I would advise to people is very early on, if you can figure out where your strengths lie, that is the kind of input you should take to determine what career you want to pursue. And again, I would also like to tell you that careers are not something that, once I made a mistake, so you don't get married to your career. So it's not like once I've taken a decision, it's meant for life. Like, for instance, as you would have seen in my profile, I worked in the corporate world for around 16, 17 years before I decided to quit and start off my own journey as an entrepreneur. So nothing stops us from taking chances, moving on to something new, depending on wherever your strength lies. Like during my corporate career, I realized that what I loved most was to create something from scratch. I used to set up new business units and so on. That was something I really enjoyed. Then I said, maybe now it's time to start my own venture. So focus on your strengths. Career is not a one-time decision in life. So you can always make a change. And I would always encourage you, like that point on seek exposure, right? The more the variety of roles that you do, the options that you explore, the greater the chances of you finding something that you really love. So like Steve Jobs said, right? If you find something that you love, then you won't have to work a day in your life. So keep that as something which directs you.
Thank you, ma'am. We do have a lot of options available today, and indeed youth are pursuing those options. Whether others like it or not, they do pursue those options, which is indeed fantastic. The other dimension of this particular question was about the emphasis on psychological success. What do we feel about a certain thing? Like even in the case of the two characters who were brought into the presentation, they have their own mindsets and feelings about this.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we work on that? How do we work on that so that they feel happy about what they're doing?
Mm-hmm. You made a right point, which said each one has a different definition of success, right? So when I said you have to play to your strengths, there are two aspects to it. One is play to your strengths in terms of what skills do you bring to the table that can set you apart in whichever field you're in. So like for instance, if my skill was in clarity of thought, so when I used to do consulting, I could go to a client location, understand the problem that they were facing, and I used to have this absolute clarity of thought, which helped me structure the entire process as to how we would go about solving that problem for a client. So consulting was the right option for me. The other thing was from a personal satisfaction standpoint, right? It gave me a lot of satisfaction to be able to solve problems, to be able to make people, make an impact on people on the way they're working and so on. So it was very gratifying for me every time I completed an engagement and managed to, make that impact on whichever process I was looking at. So that was success to me. At that point in time. So like you said, people can define success in their own terms. Find a role or a job that plays to your strengths, utilizes the skills that you have, and also gives you satisfaction based on however you define success in whatever terms.
Excellent, ma'am. I would also like you to kind of specify how we can encourage that, because in terms of people who want to do that, there are a lot of external stimuli which speak against them. I mean, you're always being compared, and given today's world where there's so much of success going around, how do you encourage children to say that this is the right thing? How do you encourage them to say, okay, you've done well there. It may not be worth £1 million, but it certainly is well. How do you encourage people in that direction?
So I think as most of us attending this session, right, we either already have kids or will probably have kids in the near future. One thing that we should try and do is to encourage them to pursue whatever they are good at. If let's say Sachin Tendulkar's mom and dad said, why aren't you focusing on your studies? Put, who gets selected in the Indian cricket team, forget cricket and come and study. Then, the world would have been a poorer place for lack of his talent being exposed. So as parents, I think one, it is our responsibility to encourage our kids in whatever they are pursuing. Secondly, as far as possible, whether it is kids, whether it is people on our team that we are managing, I think we need to instill this value of taking risks. All of us are so stuck in our comfort zones, age old. There was a point in time when our grandparents probably started with one job and retired in the same job. But today that is not the case. You can do so much more. So encourage people to move out of their comfort zones. You never learn anything by sitting in your comfort zone. So move out of your comfort zone, try new things. That is where you will find out what you really love, and start doing more of that. So as parents, I would suggest we encourage that. As I remember when I was working in early days, when I was working in one of the firms that I was eventually working in, there was this team member who had joined from an IIT, an amazing engineer. He was one of the best members in my team. We used to rely a lot on him. One day he walks up to me and says, I want to quit my job because I have a startup idea and I want to go pursue this. This was probably 10 years ago when startups were not as hot and as, successful. I felt very bad letting him go because he was like the most valued person in my team. It would make a huge impact on, for me to find someone else like that. But I sat back and thought that with this guy's talent and intelligence, he could probably create an amazing venture. So why should I be the one to discourage him? And I said, yeah, go ahead, and all the best. So, as managers also, sometimes we need to take those tough decisions, but let's encourage people to find where they find their happiness, where their skills are best utilized, because that's the secret of life eventually, right? I was listening to Stephen Kotler talk about the concept of flow the other day, and what he mentioned made so much sense. He said that, in fact, it was not Stephen Kotler. In relation to flow, there was this Greek leadership guru who basically mentioned that after World War II got over, the happiest people who, despite the various, things that they would have seen during the war, the happiest people were those who had found flow in their lives. So whatever they were doing, whether it was playing a musical instrument, writing poetry, or whatever it's that activity or whatever work that they were doing, if it got them into a state of flow, they were happy. It made them ecstatic. So, let's all go find whatever is that activity or profession that gets us into a state of flow and pursue it.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think now you're connected absolutely to this protean carrier and the psychological success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our job in the environment to get people to feel encouraged and motivated about it. Ma'am, the next question is about what youngsters, particularly those graduates who get into their careers, may not be MBAs, who get into their careers, what should they do in the first 2 to 5 years? You see a lot of dissonance there because people come in with ideas, they do something, they're not able to do something, the environment is very different, and you see a lot of churn and the kind of attrition rate, not just the money which is being offered, but the attrition rate is also an indicator of the kind of, okay, I need to do something else. So what do you think people should do in the first 2 to 5 years?
So one of the first things, and I've been dealing with a lot of young people, like you said, people who recently graduated in the early parts of their career. One thing that I've noticed is there is a lot of dissonance. It's almost like when you're studying on campus, or when you're pursuing your education, you have a very flowery impression of the work environment, and once you actually get into a job, it's like a shock, and you're wondering, where did I land, and so on. So within a year, people start getting disillusioned, and they say, maybe this is not the right place for me. It's too soon to react like that. The first thing I want to tell you, after having spent over 20 years in the corporate world plus the startup world, I can tell you that a year is too small a unit of time to really take a decision in. So initial times, I mean, when I went to IIM for the first time, in the first 1 month, I did not like the hostel I was staying in. I said, let me get rid of IIM, go back home. So those kind of decisions, you will tend to, those kind of thoughts come into your mind when you're taking decisions in the moment without really looking at it long term. So the first advice is wait it out. Don't just say within 6 months that I'm not happy. Either you've not understood your job properly, because you would have taken that decision based on some logic, right? That I want to join whatever it is, IBM, Accenture, based on the company's reputation, etc. So give it time. Give your boss some time, give the company some time to create the right kind of role for you. Now, after spending a year or two, if you still realize that this work is not ideal, the environment is not ideal, at that point, you can then start to look out. But even before you do that, I suggest that if you have a thought in mind, that let's say you were in a programming role and you suddenly realize that, I think I would have made a better consultant, or I would have made a better game designer. talk to another game designer, talk to another consultant to understand what that field entails. Again, do not jump from the frying pan into the fire, not knowing what that second field entails. The grass is always greener on the other side, but find out how green it is before you make that leap. So take informed decisions. And the third thing is use the first few years of your career as a launch pad. So try and, irrespective of whether you're in the same company or in different companies, if you change roles, try and get exposure to as many different types of roles as you can. So if you're in a programmer role, nothing stops you from volunteering for, let's say, a marketing assignment. Take charge of some social media campaign and so on. So by doing this, by getting into a variety of projects, you get exposure, and you might realize, you know what, maybe though I'm an engineer, I am amazing at marketing. So, maybe I need to do an MBA and get into a marketing role because that is apt for me. So get more exposure and you'll realize what is your strength. And then you can fixate on that and say, fine, this is where I want to be. So I'd say give it time, get as much exposure as you want. And before making a leap, talk to people within that newer field that you're interested in so that you make an informed decision and, not regret it later.
Very good, ma'am. I think there are 4 points which come out. First is to wait. The second is to reflect. The third is to discuss. And the fourth is the launch pad, where you kind of reflect and get your strengths. What is it that you can do next, and what have you gained in those particular years?
Right. One more point I'd like to mention, which again is very critical, which I've seen happen with the younger generation, is I'm not sure if it is social media or what, but these people have too much stress and pressure, and they're almost doing it themselves, in the sense that unless they are doing 10 things at one point in time, apart from their job, they should be, a creator on some channel, let's say a YouTube or TikTok or whatever. They should be part of some industry professional group. They should be, unless they're doing 10 things at some point, at a point in time, right? They almost feel as if they're missing out. So that fear of missing out is so high. And as a result, they stress themselves out to such an extent that most of them tend to get depressed. And, that's a huge risk, again, if you don't take care of your mental health. So this comparison culture that social media has brought in should absolutely be, stopped, or at least do it in moderation. Do not keep comparing yourselves to 10 other people. As all of you know, what is shown on social media is the best part of our life. Nobody is always sitting in Maldives sipping a cocktail on the beach. That is just once in a year. But those are the pictures that you always end up seeing. So that's one thing I'd like to mention.
Okay, so we are also talking about some level of focus and some level of emotional balance going into it. The next one is about people who are a bit more older. Today, these are times of VUCA, and the pandemic has only accelerated that. So we have a lot of professionals who are kind of achieved what they have to do very early on. And then suddenly the floor shifts. And, what was something which was looking very nice, whether it was a startup, because of forces, environmental forces, is no longer as relevant. So what is your suggestion to this group of members?
Right. That's a good question. And VUCA probably set in even before the pandemic. The pandemic probably brought it more into focus. So what I would tell people is, again, going back to those active career management principles, two things are very important. One is you have to continue to learn. You cannot rest on your past laurels. If I took a lot of people, when I graduated from an IIM, told me that, okay, now you're set for life. And Professor Prasad, you also probably would have heard that. So, okay, you graduated from an IIM, so you're set for life. But if we had relied on those credentials and said, fine, now that I've graduated from an IIM, I've arrived in life, and I, just need to put down my head and work, nothing would have happened. So irrespective, you cannot rest on your past laurels at any point in time. You have to constantly almost look at it as if there is someone out there who is gunning for your job. So you should always be on your toes, always keep learning, always keep thinking, why am I better than the other person in order to do this particular role? So either you have an extra certification, either you know more about the domain, or whatever it is. So stay on your toes, keep learning, don't rest on your past laurels. The second thing is, like I said, right, it is never too late to change your career path, change your role, change move from a corporate life to a startup life like I did, it is never too late to pursue your dreams. A lot of, in fact, yesterday I was reading a study by Harvard on the unicorns, the startup successes, and the age at which the founders started those startups. The average age of some of the most successful startups ever is 42 years. When the founders were 42 years old and they started their startup, that is when they became most successful, because by then you've learned so much in your life. There's a lot of exposure that you have, a lot of maturity that you bring to the table. So all this makes you a much stronger founder than, maybe a college grad who would have started. So it's never too late, whether you're 40, 50, 30, whatever. If you think you need a change in your career, please go ahead and attempt it. I keep telling people, let us not look at failure as an end all. If you fail in something, it does not mean you're a failure in life. You've just failed on that one attempt that you made, and the very fact that you made an attempt makes you so much better than everyone else who did not even try. So I would appreciate those who had the courage to try something new and failed, because you are much more competent, efficient. You've learned so much more than the others who did not even attempt. So I love this poem, Man in the Arena, by Theodore Roosevelt. You should read it if you get a chance. But the ones who are out there fighting are the ones who know what it requires to win or lose. By sitting on the sidelines, it's very easy for any of us to make comments, but keep pursuing your passion, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to make a change at any point in time, and stay on your toes. There is no place for complacency anywhere, irrespective of whether you're a CEO. Or in fact, you would notice most of the CEOs are the ones who spend time every day. There's something called a 5-hour rule, which is very common. It basically says in a week, you have to spend at least 5 hours learning something new. So that means one hour a day on every weekday, or all 5 hours on a weekend, if that's the way you prefer it. So make time, at least 5 hours a week you have to spend on upskilling yourself through whatever channels suit you. So this will help you stay relevant and manage this.
Helps you, and the fact that it is never too late and your existing experience helps you. And I think the personas that you were mentioning about certainly added a flavor to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in such a situation, how do you make decisions? Because the kind of opportunities which are available, you can take 1, 2, 3. It is said today that people who have been thrown out of their jobs have more jobs at better salaries. So under such a situation, how do you make better decisions about the next step that you'll take?
So I think this is where your long-term career aspiration comes into the picture, and your overall definition of success also, right? If I were to define my success, let's say when I'm 60 years old, 65 years old, and I've actually thought about this, so I know the answer. I would want to be in a place where, one, I have made an impact on the world. Not just, it's very easy to make an impact on your own life, on your family's life, make enough money so that your family lives comfortably, maybe in the next generation lives comfortably. But my aim is to make an impact on the world that is bigger than me, create something that is bigger than me. The second thing is, I want to leave a legacy where I have learned a lot of lessons throughout my career, professional life, and so on. And one of the reasons that I blog so much is because I want to share. I'm the kind of person who reflects on everything, whether I'm successful, failure. I've encountered failure. I want to draw lessons from that, because otherwise, what use is this experience, right? Unless you've reflected on it and drawn some lessons. So I want to share these lessons with others, because I don't want someone else to make the same mistake that I did. If they can learn from my mistake, it's better for them. So that is the reason I do that. So I want to be able to share my experience, or even if I end up being a role model for one person or two people, I'd still be happy. The third thing is, I always want to make time for myself, for my own happiness, whatever gives me pleasure. So irrespective of how busy I am on a day-to-day basis, I make a point to exercise. 30 minutes I will find, even if my calls finish at 8 p.m. in the night, I will exercise from 8 to 8:30. But I make time for that. I make time to read, because that brings me a lot of pleasure and also helps me learn. So I will never compromise on my happiness. So these are three things that are extremely important to me. all of us have to decide what is it that is important. Is it fame that is important for you? Do you want to become extremely famous at that point where everybody says you are the best analytics person in the industry? And basis that, you choose your next role, because that should guide your pursuits. If somebody is paying me, for instance, let us say 3 crores to do a role, which will leave me with zero time for myself. I'll always be on a plane hopping from one country to the other. Maybe I won't take it, because my entire thing about finding time for myself to make myself happy will not be met by that. So once your career aspirations, your definitions of success are clear, it will make it very easy for you to choose. But if on the other hand, your goal is to create wealth for 3 generations, you want to become like an Ambani or an Adani, then maybe you would take that 3 crore role, or maybe you would quit and start a venture of your own and want to make it a unicorn. So that should help you take a decision on what to do next.
Absolutely. I think now you've brought it down to absolute personalization. And I think it is something like a life mission that you're talking about. And I'm remembered about the tombstone test, which was given by Steve Jobs to John Scully when he recruited John Scully. I mean, the story after that being very different, where the question was, what would you like to see written on your tombstone? Is it that you sold cola water, which is what he was doing at Pepsi, or do you want to change lives? So I think you are indicating exactly that what is important in your life, what would you like to be known by the time you cross a certain age. And I think that is absolute fundamentals.
Right.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for highlighting that. Now we come to the associated question. Now, in this, how do you achieve work-life balance?
So I have, I find it very surprising when people ask me this question, because I've somehow managed to find, in fact, I've managed to integrate my work in life in a way that I'm able to give equal bandwidth to both of them. Well, there are days that, your work takes up more than your family or your personal life. There are days when your family needs more attention than work. But at an overall level, I think there are a few things that are important. First, we should let go of this perfection syndrome, where I've been in situations where just yesterday through the Star and Me, we were doing a session on the superwoman syndrome. And I was telling them an anecdote where a few years ago, when my son was very young, I'd moved to this new gated community. And I met a couple of mothers on the playground, and they said, hey, what classes does your son go to? Does he go for cricket classes? Are you teaching him any musical instruments? Is he learning another language? And I was shocked. I mean, I used to come back from work, pick him from daycare and come back home. I had no time to ferry him around for other classes. But then they almost made me feel like I was not a good mother, just because my son was missing out on all this. Eventually, I buckled under that pressure and I put him into some class and somehow managed it. But later on, I was thinking, if I don't believe in it, why am I sort of doing this just because of what others might think? So the first thing is get rid of the perfection syndrome. What is perfect for you may be very different from what is perfect for me. And unless somebody is standing in your shoes, it's very difficult for them to pass any judgment on what you're doing and how you're managing your life. So get rid of that. You don't have to be the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect mother, the perfect wife or sister. It's okay if you're too tired to make dinner, keep a cook, order dinner from outside. Nobody's going to fall sick. So forget the perfection syndrome. The second thing is, it is perfectly okay to say no to things. I do not like to attend a lot of functions, things that happen in the relative circle. I'm not very comfortable. I'd rather lie in bed or read a book or spend time with my family. So I do not think twice before saying no to something, unless it's somebody really close to me and I feel like I have to attend. I say no to a lot of these events. So say no to whatever doesn't make sense for you. Don't give in to pressure and do that. The third thing is, I think we should ourselves define boundaries for, what you will do and what you will not do. For instance, I used to manage a global team when I was in consulting. My team members were all around the world. I used to take calls at all times in the evening, morning, because, when I had a US team, that's the only time that worked for them. But on weekends, I would never open my laptop. And I made it clear to everybody that my Saturday, Sunday is my time. I'm not going to check email. I'm not going to answer calls. So that was where I set the boundary, and I said, this is something that I will not budge on. So make these boundaries, these rules for yourselves. And finally, work with your spouse. I and my husband studied together at an IIM, and we got married soon after we graduated. And I made it clear to him that both our careers are important. Nobody's going to take a back seat, and everything that happens in our life, we have to have equal ownership. So it's not like one person is doing the bulk of the taking the bulk of the responsibility. So once you have this balance in life with your spouse, with the other family members, I think that makes a huge difference. And find support wherever you can find it, especially if there are women attending this, through your parents, through hire help wherever you need it. It is worth that money to hire a cook, instead of you having to spend so much time in the kitchen. So it is something that you should always rely on. Work on a support system, create a support system for you. I never would have been able to travel so much and do my consulting role if not for support from my parents being in the same city and so on, having a cook, a maid, and so on. So figure out your support system. That's the only way this will work.
Excellent, ma'am. I think you've added a lot of perspective to how we have started off between Emma and Olivia. And I think it gives a lot of personalized input to people, which they have to set right in their lives, or at least get to that over a period of time, which will help them to handle their careers in the way they define it. And I think the 3 principles that you mentioned about perfection, I am perfect as I am, to say no to things and define boundaries, and the support system are extremely useful to get the focus on this. Thank you very much, ma'am. There are some other questions, but I'm handing the the stage back to Professor Rao.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Prasad. You have closed it exactly at 5:02. Thank you very much for that. Ma'am, this is very interesting. Actually, why we are going on and on is that it is directly useful to a large number of people. Those who have joined now here on Zoom as well as on the Facebook, I'm pretty sure that they are quite eagerly, watching everything and making notes of this conversation. It is useful. I request you to spend a little more time and finish up a few other questions also. I'll try and make these questions very short and selective, and then you can choose to take the time that you want to respond in terms of the answer. Yeah, in this cluster, I'll take just 3 questions, and very quickly I'll try and raise these questions for you. The first one is, in the circumstances of negative work pressure, how can one grow the professional career or professional life? So the participant is perhaps trying to understand how can one deal with this negative work pressure that is generally prevalent across organizations, across sectors.
So I'm not sure if I understand negative work pressure the way the person meant it, but I'm assuming that it is either that you're surrounded by a team that may not be the best team to work with in terms of their cooperation, in terms of the general spirit, etc. Or you may be working with a manager who may not be ideal, because a lot of negativity comes from the people that you work with, because that creates a lot of pressure on you. The only other pressure negatively could be in terms of the amount of workload, which is easy to solve. I think it's always good to walk up to your manager or your manager's manager and tell them that your workload is way more than you can handle, given reasoning. So go with numbers, go with data, because if you generally go and say, I have a lot of workload, nobody will believe you. So do your analysis, go prepared, and then make your case as to why the work pressure is high and why it needs to be reduced. In the other 2 cases of too much negativity either coming in from your team, right, then look for options to move to a different team within the organization, because I'm assuming the organization must be good enough. If your team is an exception for some reason, move out. If you do not have a manager who is good to work with, and I have been in situations like this in the past, and I have always made it a point to move out of that particular role, because nothing is worth that mental stress that follows from working with someone who is not the ideal person to work with. It is just not worth it. If it means talking about it to someone else who is senior in the organization, which I have done in my own career, or if it means moving out, to a different team, to a different organization, I think it's worth taking that decision. No amount of money is worth the pressure of having to put up with a negative manager. So that is my advice to you.
Yeah, in fact, there was another question related to how to handle a tough boss. I mean, the meaning of tough boss is actually not in the theoretical sense, but loaded towards negative things. So that question was also there from another participant. How do we handle? Do you have any tips to actually deal with that? Maybe it is not black and white, tough and negative, somewhere in between.
Right. So I think there is a very simple way to determine whether it's a negative boss or a tough boss. A negative boss is someone whose values do not align with your values, very simply. I mean, if they are the kind of boss who believes that unless you are in office 9 to 5 and in front of me, then that means you're not working. Or you have to leave the office after I leave and before I come in, otherwise you're not working. Or if they ask you to cut corners to do things when it is not in line with your values, then these are red flags. Now, this is not something you should put up with. That is the instance when you either move to a different team or talk about this with someone senior in the organization. Now, a tough boss could actually be a good thing. When by tough, I mean someone who is asking the right questions, who is pushing you to realize your potential, because that is in fact a blessing. If you have a boss who knows that you are capable of so much more, and if they are pushing you to do your best, then I think that's a good situation to be in. Work with that boss, because such a boss is actually interested in your growth, and that's the reason they're trying to be tough with you. So work with them and realize your potential. So tough boss, I think, is good. They will help you become a much, much better person than you already are. But a negative boss, I think you should, try to find a way out somehow.
Excellent. So tough bosses are a blessing in a way, because they're interested in your career, in your growth.
Right.
And we should try and deal with it and learn from the instructions or from the demands and the challenges that come by. Wonderful. Some of the participants who are wanting to ask questions directly can raise their hand. Srikanth, did we see any hand raised till now? If so, let me know and allow them. We can probably ask them to raise the question themselves. In the meantime, I will take another question, ma'am. This is, what are the parameters should one consider to choose between an Indian MNC and an overseas MNC? I mean, the example given is RIL versus Shell. Just to define Indian MNC vis-a-vis an overseas MNC.
Right. I have worked in an Indian MNC and in global MNCs. So I think a lot depends on the culture. And you can't generalize. You can't say that all Indian MNCs are like this or all global MNCs are like this, but there is enough information online and by talking. That's why you need a good professional network. If let's say you're getting an offer from RIL, if you have a strong network, you can always ask a friend, hey, do you know anyone who's working at RIL or has worked there? I'd like to have a chat with them and have a conversation to figure out, how is the culture? Is it in line with the kind of culture you would like to work in? And similarly, even a global MNC doesn't, make it, you can't generalize. You can't say that all global MNCs have a very good culture in terms of flexible work, etc. There are different companies working in different ways. So the best thing is to ask someone who is working there or who has worked there. Obviously, the second thing is depending on the amount of money they are offering you in that particular job, and you can take a call based on that. And thirdly, the kind of opportunities that you have for exposure. So if the global MNC, for instance, has a culture which says, I want to move people across functions, they don't say that if you join in finance lifelong, you have to stay in finance. They're saying if they're open to you getting into HR or operations or IT, and learning something new, then that is something you should prefer to get into, because like I said, the greater the exposure, the more well-rounded a professional you will become. So these are typical criteria you should use. I don't know if I answered the question on Indian versus global, but my advice on that would be to talk to people who have worked there. And nowadays I see a lot of senior people, when they're looking for jobs, approach me or people in my team and say, do you know anyone who has worked in this company before? Because we have a few questions. So put in that effort to find that out. That's the best way to figure out.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Earlier also you mentioned about maintaining your professional network and the ability to keep talking to members from other teams, at least, if not your own team where you're already working. That keeps it open for knowing new people, and whenever there's a requirement, you can actually raise your hand and ask them about these new opportunities or the queries about such Indian MNC versus overseas MNCs. So thank you very much for that. It was again that Emma versus Olivia. So if you were Olivia, you would have had network and you would have asked them those questions. Yeah, so nice. So we have a hand raised now. Srikanth, can you please allow Mr. Singham? Please keep the question direct, Mr. Ramesh, and come to the point directly.
Actually, the carrier person is having a DNA of certain thing, but he is trying to achieve something odd. Means, is it achievable or not in a carrier ocean? Actually, it is a ocean like that carrier. Whether how he is not, unless he is going to enter into that ocean and swim only, he knows the depth of the ocean. He also doesn't know that if he is a swimmer, he doesn't know the depth of the ocean at all. Then how we are going to calibrate the strength to achieve that carrier, whether he is the right person suitable for that carrier or not. He wants to swim, he wants to fly on the from a greater heights. Is he capable enough to fly from greater heights, from hilly area? All the DNAs are not suitable. Am I right?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Ramesh. One thing is, like Reid Hoffman once said, an entrepreneur is someone who takes a leap from the mountain and builds a parachute on the way down. So, typically what happens in life is not everything is straightforward. You may, for instance, I may have heard stories of several unicorn startups in India and then decided that, okay, fine, because there are so many unicorns, I can also start one and become a unicorn. But then the industries, the founders, the challenges they faced, everything could be very different. So unless you actually take a risk, make that leap and then figure things out, you will never know the right answer. So what you have to decide is, are you willing to take that step? Are you okay with failing? Like I said, failure should be worn as a badge of honor. The fact that you have tried something and failed is, you are much better than someone who has not tried at all. So the question you should ask yourself is, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, has something called a regret minimization framework that he talks about. So basically he says it's a very simple test. Imagine yourself at 70 years of age, looking back at this particular decision that you had to make. And look at what the 70-year-old you would have thought about you either taking this risk or not taking this risk, and based on that you make a decision today. So basically I think I would suggest, don't have any regrets in life. Go ahead, try it out. Only once you try, you will know whether you swim or drown, unless it's something that is actually a question of life or death. It does not matter. I mean, you can anything that is non-life threatening is worth a try. And once you attempt it, you will know. If you fail, also take it as a badge of honor, learn from it, and then move on. But it's better not to have regrets.
Correct, Ma. My question here is, one thing is, there is a time waste. If I am going to try failure, I am happy to take the failure because it is a learning lesson for me always. But the time waste is not going to be regainable.
So you should not look at it as a waste of it is not a waste of time if it is given you a valuable lesson at the end. So even if you spent a year doing something and you failed, that year is not a waste because you've learned what works and what does not work, and you're more mature because of that experience. So it's never a time waste from that. So unless you're doing anything illegal, I don't think it is a time waste. Everything teaches you in life. All you need to do is figure out what exactly you've learned from there and use it as you go forward.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes. Ramesh Garu, thank you very much for raising
Thank
that
you.
question. It's a difficult question, actually, in the sense that it is also a little bit judgmental when you look at others, saying that aspiration versus the capability of doing or going for it. Unless and until you try, how can we judge that the aspiration is really valid or not? We should keep trying, as ma'am has mentioned. And instead of commenting on others, I think we should focus on ourselves. If I were to make the choice, I would go for it. I would take that risk. And in case I fail, as ma'am said, I take it as a badge of honor. I have learned a lot and come back and probably correct myself and try a little better. So that's where it is. So thank you for raising that question. Uma Garu, what we'll do is we'll go for another question now from the audience. Sanjay, would you like to take the question, Sanjay?
When you are an entrepreneur, I mean, it is linked to that particular, why I haven't seen your viewers or more active at HMA, because the ability to give in the VUCA world far supersedes the ability to keep on just talking about things and making things happen. So what have you done so far to actually ensure that certain ideas that you have been able to propagate and learn? One of the very excellent things that I could see very clearly is journaling. That is excellent on your side. Now, can you share the process of being able to use journaling as a guide for the younger generation, which is actually the question, the importance of journaling that has to be driven down for learning and discipline to be able to contribute in life as entrepreneurs? How important do you think is that? And how has it helped you in your life?
Yeah. So a good question. While I may to answer the previous point that you mentioned also, while I may not have been active in WeWork, I'm quite associated with T-Hub and WeHub and a lot of other startup forums. So
sorry, I meant WeHub, not WeWorks. WeHub.
Okay. So T-Hub is one thing that I've been quite active in, and there are a lot of women entrepreneur forums that I get involved in. On the other question around journaling and adding value, right? So what I personally believe in is all of us through our experience have learned a lot of lessons in life, by trying and by failing and succeeding and so on. So there is always someone else in the world who is looking for the learning that you can share with them. A lot of people, especially when you ask them to share their thoughts, either in terms of writing or in terms of a video or podcast, are very shy because you wonder, who am I to give gyan? I'm not a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk. So why should I be the one sharing it? I also had a couple of these thoughts when I got started, but what eventually convinced me is, even if there are a couple of people somewhere in the world who will draw knowledge and experience and value from what I'm sharing, then I think it is worth it. Hence the reason that I started blogging so frequently. What I would suggest to people around journaling, it's not just journaling, but my advice to people is to spend time on self-reflection and introspection. So whatever happens in life, right? I see a lot of people who say, I have 20 years, 30 years, 40 years experience, but when you ask them what are the 3 top lessons you've learned, and they're suddenly shocked as to what am I going to say, and that is because they've not spent time on introspection. They've not spent time on understanding, okay, fine, I went through this experience, but what did it teach me? So journaling is one way to do it, but now there are so many other platforms, channels available. So whatever suits. I think the younger generation may be more comfortable with a YouTube or an Instagram reel, but whatever it is, in whatever way you can add value to others, I think you should go ahead and do that. That would be my advice.
Great.
Thank you, Uma.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay, for raising that question. Thank you very much. Ma'am, what we'll do is I'll just take one question and wait for another person. Miss Aparna is asking the question. I'll bring in her in a moment. The question that I have is before that, why has talk small and do big lost its value? I think this is one of the, it looks simple, but Has the time for talking small and doing big lost its value? Is it? That's the question.
So I guess it is probably the other side of personal branding. So when I talk about personal branding, I tell people it's a double-edged sword. One is, the way you should look at it is, how am I able, personal branding is not about bragging about yourself. It's more about how are you as a person able to add value to the others. So it's more about what do you represent and how can you add value to the others. So this entire thing about talking small and doing big is, don't I think you're right in saying that this is something that you don't see a lot of today. People keep talking big and eventually deliver much less. So as long as you stop this entire thing about comparison, right? Don't compare yourself with anyone. Work silently and let your work and the results speak for themselves. That should be the attitude that you have, because at the end of the day, you should remember, we as a population, as a civilization, are very intelligent. If you just keep talking and your results don't match what you're saying, you will get discovered. You cannot be on that fake pedestal for a long time that you've placed yourself on. So think about it as a field where everybody can see what you're doing. So if you talk big and don't deliver, then you will get found out, if not today, tomorrow. So keep that in mind when you go out and make proclaim that you are going to achieve A, B, and C. Let your work speak for itself. I think that's the advice I would leave you with.
Well, that's a very interesting advice, definitely, as far as that question is concerned. But Ms. Uma, I would like to ask that in the beginning of your session, you said that when you put down your head and work and make the work talk for itself, you thought that's not your way of managing your career actively. So how do you balance these two statements, one at the beginning and one at the end?
Right. No, I think I stick to the same thing. What I basically said is, talk about the results, talk about the value you're adding, talk about the work you've done and the appreciation you've received. But do not, there are people who come in and say, I am the best person on this team and I'm going to do all this without having done it, which is the wrong thing to do. Let the results speak for it. But once you have done some amazing work, don't keep it a secret. I mean, do you want to be the world's best kept secret? Do you want, on your deathbed, people to realize, hey, Uma was one of the most intelligent people on earth, but nobody ever got to know? Because that's very unfortunate, right? So use your gifts to help other people. If you're able to do something, if you achieve something, let people know, but let your results speak. Talk about it once you've achieved it. Do not proclaim and say that I'm going to achieve this tomorrow without having anything to back it up. So always have a backing, always have data behind you whenever you talk about it.
Very good. Excellent. I think once you do a good work and there are results, and you can start talking about the results, and don't be the best kept secret of your era, your organization or your team. So that's a very interesting response. I'll take one more question, and then after that, I think we can close that. There is one interesting question that popped up in the Q&A box. What would be the role of the management to address concerns regarding a self-centered team member? Perhaps there's an expectation on the management to respond to this when someone raised this question, but maybe based out of your long years of experience, you can answer what should management do and how should they handle this when there is a self-centered team member, how to deal with that.
So typically as a manager from your team, you expect two things. One is you want them to be the best that they can be. So as an individual, you want this individual to perform at their best, at their peak. The second thing is you want them to not do this at the detriment of the other team members. So, it's like that frog in the well. Should I push everyone else down and climb to the top, or can I find a way for all of us to go to the top together? So that is how I think, as long as this person is self-centered, working on themselves, doing a great job and not harming anyone else, it is still okay. But if they are doing things at the cost of others not progressing and putting others down, then I think it is time for someone to step in and intervene and have a conversation with that person to tell them that even if you perform extremely well and the entire team is not done well, you will not grow. Because I mean, it's logical, right? A lot of organizations today have variable performance that has multiple components. There is an individual performance component and there is a team performance component. So even if you do amazingly well and you don't support anyone, your individual component might be high, but the entire team component of your bonus will go down. So it's a win-lose sort of a situation. The second thing is, if your entire team is not doing well because of you, then the amount of budget you have to promote people will also be low. So obviously, if your team is not seen as a well-performing team, they may not have any quota for promotion. So you are again losing out. So this discussion, I think somebody should have. If you are a team member and you see someone doing this, I think you should immediately raise it with your manager. Either have a conversation with that fellow team member if you're close to that person, else raise it with the manager and let them resolve it. So again, my point is, do not work in an environment where you are not at your positive, optimistic self. Whatever is affecting your work spirit, I think you should bring it up with your management team and try to resolve it. Don't let that stress sit on your mind.
Excellent. Actually, this is again fitting into the framework which you presented initially, along those 7 essential steps that you recommended. This is one of them. In case there is the negativity around, or in case there is a stress building around, one should actually speak up, talk, discuss, and try and resolve the issue. So thank you very much for that wonderful answer, ma'am. There is one interesting question again that has come up. VUCA on the external front can be handled by internal strength. How does one handle hyperlocal VUCA? This is raised by Lavanya.
Again, I'm not sure what exactly you mean by that. But typically, right, there are 2 ways to look at the entire VUCA situation. Either you consider it a risk and you avoid it and say, look at it with a pessimistic attitude. I was always very good at my domain. Now everything is changing. The future of work has happened. The industry is changing. And, there is this great resignation going on. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. So have that fear sort of a mindset and say, look at the entire thing in a negative vein, in which case your stress level goes up. The other way to look at it is, hey, this is an amazing environment where everything is changing. Nothing is constant. So it almost equalizes, right? Irrespective of whether you're from a tier 1 institute or a tier 3 institute or what kind of experience you have, we are all almost brought to a level playing field. And now look at it that way and say, whoever adapts the fastest, whoever learns the most, and whoever can think creatively is the one who will succeed. So look at it that way and start thinking creatively, start learning more than everyone else. So it has now created a level playing field for you to set yourself apart. So it all boils down to active career management again. Always think of ways to differentiate yourself. Why am I better than everyone else in my field? Because if you want to succeed, you have to be better than most other people in your field, right? And how will you be better than most other people? Either you have more certifications from them, either your domain is stronger than them, either you are more connected than them. If I'm an analytics expert and I know the best analytics experts around the world, then that connection makes me stronger. So decide what is it that will make me better than most other professionals in my field, and go after those things, because that will make you more successful, in such an environment.
Great. That's wonderful. I think you have responded to most of the questions. And some of the participants who wanted to ask you have already finished their questions. With your permission, we will try and conclude this, ma'am, now. I want to thank on behalf of ICFAI thank you very much for this wonderful session. Right from the start till now, I think around 90 minutes of session so far. It's been so engaging and very energetic in the way you are talking. Actually, we must compliment your eloquence in thought as well as eloquence in the expression in this session. Thank you very much for that. Some of the salient points, if I have to recall for the benefit of the participants, very few I will do, but the significant ones I have in my mind, without even referring to my notes, is the scenarios that you built between Emma and Olivia. There are many Emmas and many Olivias among us. I think most of us skew towards Emma. The personas that we have, we need to work on it actively and actually move towards steering or taking control of the career that we would like to build. You have motivated us by giving some data about yourself that you managed to read about 100 books a year. I mean, that's the starting point where it began so very well and positive. 100 books a year over the last 20 years that you've been reading is a large number of books that you read, about 2000 books that you read so far, if not more than it, at least 2000 books you would have read. That's a very nice statement of a role model for all the participants who would like to follow that path. And because of that, with greater ease, you are able to quote many authors and entrepreneurs, not only quote, but also relate to some of these situations and challenges that one encounters and how to address those issues. So it has come out extremely well, and it was very useful to all of us. The second point, which you almost pulled out of your own personal experience, or I would say your own worldviews about career, is also very interesting. That do the good work and tell the world about it, that you have done good work. In simple language, that's what you have done. The other thing, the third and the most important aspect is about one should have a systematic or methodical way of actually managing one's career, and the essential steps that you have given. Those essential steps, if one writes down and pursues carefully and methodically, one would definitely end up managing career, steering the career properly. Looking for networks, looking for mentors, seniors, looking for allies is the watchword, or the area to focus for all of us. No matter where you are in your career, I think having mentors and allies, having sponsors is going to help us, and they are going to work on your behalf. And it's not that only when you need, you go and discover them, but one should have as a practice identified, and one should have maintained a regular conversation with them, updated them about one's own progress and learnings and achievements. Then it would work at a required time. So that's the way that you have. And the fourth one is a knowledge capsule a day keeps the obsolescence away or at bay. That's what you mentioned. It's so true. One has to keep on learning. Majority of the members who participated in this session are working professionals. It applies to all of them, all of us, that we are little weak on this constant learning or learning forever. If we maintain a certain schedule and a discipline about learning, I'm sure it is going to help us in our own professional career, and it gives us a lot of time for thinking about it, clarifying it within ourselves, which is called reflecting on it, and then implementing in our own work life, as well as in our own teams, organizations, and also in our personal life, because work impacts personal life as well, as much as personal life impacts work in many ways. In the question and answer sessions, several queries have been taken up, and those queries are also beautifully answered by you, ma'am. We are very thankful to you. And these questions, some of the members have asked, I'm sure they have really faced those situations, and that's the reason they raised it. In that sense, right from the beginning, I was mentioning, it is a directly useful session. So I'm very happy that they could raise those queries, and you have very nicely answered all those queries. The 5-hour rule is also a good takeaway. 1 hour a day, or if you invest that kind of a discipline or that kind of a rule, you can keep learning and you will keep upskilling yourself throughout your career. And and those who are interested can go back and read that poem of Man in the Arena, definitely. So that is also a very important aspect. The impact that one would create, you said, if you look at yourself at 65 years of age, you would consider or weigh the impact that you would have created on the world larger than you or larger than your organization. And the other fact that you mentioned is about telling the world about what you have been experiencing and resolving in terms of a blog, as in the case, a journaling habit which you have developed over a period of time. And also making time for oneself in the, say, along the things that that make you happy. Maybe you can have time for yourself, spend time with family, whatever makes you happy. One should be able to find that kind of time, or exercise, or read, or go for cycling, or do something. So these are some of the lessons that you have helped us understand. When one of the participants has asked how to choose between an Indian MNC versus a multinational, a global MNC, you mentioned that that networking would definitely help when you have such queries to actually find out from that industry or from the trade, so that they give you relevant answers, and based on that one can decide. So it has kind of connected back in various other questions as well. The framework was really useful, and and management may not be always able to handle all the things, but it is you who should be in the driving seat to manage your career. And keeping all these aspects in mind, one can successfully lead a career, actively manage one's own career, and make it more meaningful. Some of the points that you mentioned were also useful for freshers, because they won't have any experience. They're fresh out of college. They get into their first job, and some of them look very tentative in the initial years. For them also, you have given tips that one needs to wait, consult others, discuss, and gain as much exposure as possible, and then try and make the next move, not before that. So it was extremely useful. Towards the end, when we say one for the road, the one for the road that you have given us is learn fast, adapt quickly, and work very creatively to solve some of these problems, and keep differentiating yourself to build a very nice and active, meaningful career. So thank you so much, ma'am, for this wonderful session. I'm very, very happy. This has been very useful to all of us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure interacting with all of you. I hope there was some value. And I'm on LinkedIn with the same name, if you'd like to connect and check out some of the things that I write.
Absolutely. I'll share with you a summary. A senior professor, Professor Ved, writes a summary of these sessions. I share with you and take your feedback on that as well. That is next week. And also I'll share the recording of this session with you, and I'll hear from you, and then we'll post it for the benefit of our participants on our archives. We have all the recordings of these sessions, all the 69 sessions on our archives, along with the documented summaries of each session, so that one can always go back, refer, and learn. The whole purpose, ma'am, in between also you have mentioned somewhere, the whole purpose of this is to make them reflect. If the lessons from some of the leaders from business, from non-business, whatever be the domain, if those lessons can spur some kind of critical thinking, and it can help us resolve some issues, it is going to be very useful. So we thought we should make it public, and they can refer to these things again and again. We have also published one book on the conversations that we are having. Once we finished 35 conversations, we published a book, Lessons from the Game Changers. We are going to publish another one. We are waiting for the next conversation. So once it becomes 70, the second book will also be published. Before that, we'll contact you, and we'll also seek your nod, because some of your points will be included in that book. Of course, obviously giving credit to you and referencing thoroughly as appropriate. We'll share that summary with you, and you can give your nod before we include that.
Sure.
So in this exercise, you have helped us. Thank you very much for seeing value in this, and coming forward to share your views and your expert advice, and also your time with us this evening. Thank you very much, and I look forward to interacting with you in more ways in the near future. Thank you very much, ma'am.
My pleasure. Thanks, and lovely meeting all of you. Thank you. Bye.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll meet next Friday evening at around 4 p.m. with yet another guest. We are going to have Ms. Nirupama. Ms. Nirupama is going to talk about how do we get inspired, how do we get ideation going on through qualitative research. Ms. Nirupama is working with an organization called Brandscapes, and we look forward to having a conversation with her next Friday on September 2nd at 4 p.m. Till then, keep reading about the man in the arena, Theodore Roosevelt, and also some of the tips on the self-branding that ma'am has talked about this evening. And we'll be ready for the next session next Friday. Till then, take care. Thank you all. Happy weekend.